Yeah, well, I alluded to before, I think the number one challenge really isn't about technology. I think it was like 69% of leaders don't have a clearly defined cloud strategy to guide their implementation. I mean, and that's like, you are do not pass go and collect $200, without having a cloud strategy. And as a result, we're seeing 27% of leaders say that, only 27% of leaders are saying that cloud is actually driving more strategy, more business strategy or more value.
Mm,
Well, why? Right. I mean, if you don't have a strategy that's guiding it, you're probably not going to be getting a lot of value out of it, and you're going to get disenfranchised with it. Right. It's almost like, hey, you have to be this tall to, use cloud or certainly use multi-cloud. Right. Um, so that's a really straightforward starting place. And I think you just have to base everything on working backwards from your customer needs, having some cloud strategy. How do you rationalize your implementation? And then make sure the organization understands that, being very purposeful about it. I think from a technology and operations perspective, look, security is still remains a key challenge. It's hard on prem. That's been solved in many ways on prem. Generally, it requires a little bit more of a moat around, your existing, infrastructure. As you move to a cloud provider, that changes a bit. The shared responsibility model with cloud providers changes, a bit. When you go to multi-cloud, that responsibility model tends to be very different across the different cloud providers, and there's different implementations of basic things like identity and access management. And there's very few tools that really work the same across these cloud providers in terms of user provisioning or encryption or key management, things like that. So security tends to be a huge complexity, and then you have these other operational complexities. Just that can be certainly overwhelm organizations in terms of orchestration and data. And what's interesting, right, is that that operational complexity generally results in much higher cost.
right.
Right? It's very hard to optimize sort of those type of environments because you're really spread very thin, and you end up diluting a lot of the value. And it becomes really hard to really get that cost optimization going. So you're hearing a lot of talk about things like FinOps, right? Which is like, hey, how do I really get the most out of cloud in terms of cost optimization? But a lot of that is a result of the complexities that some of it has been sort of self-induced.
Mhm. Okay. Now, I'd imagine also that processes become more difficult because you're going across environments. Can you talk about the processes and how they've become more difficult?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the key ones here is like just managing your data pipelines, right? And what's really interesting is data is right. Data is the oil right now with AI, right? As folks are going to start building their own private, LLMs or large language models, that really requires your data to be really curated and cleaned. Otherwise, you want to avoid, things like the hallucinations, certainly with your own LLMs. So you have to be able to manage that data and, have it very clean in terms of your ability to run the models on it. So you can provide some intelligent responses to whether it's business strategy or customer strategy or even customer facing applications. So the very first thing that people are struggling with is just the data pipelines associated with, having not only your on-prem, but then a cloud provider and then multiple cloud providers. So a workload orchestration is another thing we had talked about before. You have a way to do workload orchestration on-prem, then every cloud provider has a way to do workload orchestration. So that tends to start to, get a little bit chaotic as you have multiple different approaches to doing that. For companies like myself that grew up in sort of a compliant, financial services or organization, compliance becomes a very difficult thing, as you're trying to be able to show to these agencies that are managing your compliance that, hey, in fact, we are compliant. So you can point to it and show it. That becomes a really difficult thing. So then, we talked too about cost, cost optimization. I might get really good at optimizing on-prem. I might get really good at optimizing on a particular cloud, but now I'm trying to do, load balancing across, the different clouds or that becomes a difficult thing. And then ultimately, how are you managing your service level agreements? And, what are your agreements, across these different environments? Are they the same? Are they consistent? So just a tremendous amount of complexity across a hybrid cloud that the CIOs are dealing with on a daily basis.
Okay.